Just wanted to get a sense from you. When the first and second rounds of the elections were held, the perception that came out was that these were Nigeria's best organized elections in decades, and that they truly and well represented the will of Nigerians. After the last round, has the label stuck?
I think it was very good. The general perception across the country is that the elections have gone very well, apart from the hiccup we had on the first week, which had to be postponed. The National Assembly, the presidential, and the governorship elections have gone remarkably smoothly. So the only problem we had was the violence up north, but in spite of that, the general consensus is that things have gone very well.
Now, the violence in the north, would you say that's a reflection of genuine anger on the ground, or perhaps it's positioning, if you like? You know, people realizing, yes, our candidate is lost, but let's make a statement that in future you also need to put a candidate that represents, if you like, us.
Well, the truth is that there is some level of disappointment in the north. We know this argument over zoning, over the death of the late President Yar'Adua and all of that. But that would not on its own have led to violence. There was consensus across the PDP behind President Jonathan's candidacy. He got support across the country. I think what we had was the consequence of irresponsible campaigning by certain elements who had already, as it were, incited their followers to violence and led them to believe that there was no alternative to their victory in the elections.
Yeah.
I think tempers are settling down, and I think we should be able to move beyond that.
Yeah, I certainly hope so as well. But let's talk about these last elections, the elections for state governors. Now, in any other country, you would imagine if you have had your presidential election and you have had your parliamentary election, governors, they fall within the parliamentary process, don't they? Why are these governors so important in the Nigerian context?
In Nigeria, the governors are probably the most important part of our governance system. They control the 36 states. They're powerful. They tend to act based on group interests, and they control the voters. The president, for instance, had to do deals with all these governors in order to ensure his victory at the PDP primaries and that eventual election. The governors are powerful. The presidency is remote, is isolated in Abuja, and in the political process, and indeed for much of the spending, they control 50% of the country's revenue, while the federal government controls 50%. Between the governors and the local governments, they spend the other 50%.
Sure.
So they're an important, both politically and in terms of economic management.
So do voting lines for the governors then go along party lines? Does it matter that Jonathan is able to get a majority of governors that support his party?
Well, one of the most important consequences of this election is that President Jonathan's party, the PDP, has lost out completely in the southwest, that is Lagos and the 6 states around Lagos, which is Nigeria's commercial and perhaps most developed part. But beyond that, the PDP has held its ground elsewhere, even in the north, where they had not done too well in the presidential elections. Most of their governors have retained their offices. So the PDP remains formidable. It now has a stronger opposition in the Action Congress of Nigeria and 1 or 2 other states which it has lost, Nasarawa and the far north. So we may be developing a more balanced democracy in which there is a strong opposition, but the ruling party is still formidable.
A more balanced democracy in Nigeria would be good for the African continent as well.